This is an interesting story that we've talked about quite a bit on the show.
I don't think that anybody would have even anticipated the death of Mary Yoder was going to turn into such a big controversy that divided a community, that divided families.
When you see a totally healthy person 1 week, and then they say that she passed away in a day, that's very confusing.
Sheriff's office received a phone call. The family member felt that Mary's death was suspicious and wanted us to investigate.
It was at that point that we believed he was guilty.
There are two prominent families involved here, and allegiance has split this town in two.
These signs are all over the town. Here's one, we support Caitlin Conley. Here's another one right here.
I just couldn't figure out a reason why Katie would want to hurt Mary.
He said, it doesn't matter, someone's got to pay for it. Someone has to pay for the murder.
An incarcerated individual at New York State Department of Corrections.
Hi, Katie. How are you?
Oh, I'm gonna go home.
I do have to ask you, just point blank, did you have anything to do with Mary Yoder's death?
Sequoia's pretty much farm country. Most people know most everyone else's name. We hunt, we fish, we ride motorcycles.
It's one of those communities. You all go get your gas at the same gas station. You all use the same little mechanic shop to get your oil changed.
It's a very small, close-knit community, which blessing and a curse. But it's nice that you go basically anywhere in Sequoia, you're going to run into people that you know.
So we're in Sequoia, which is a small town outside of Utica, New York, which is just a couple hours away from the small town that I live in. And it's strange how they all look the same. Hello. My mom drove the school bus growing up. You get to know your neighborhood when your mom's the school bus driver. The best part about these historic districts is the front porch culture. You know your neighbors, everybody's out. You're all up in everybody's business. But when it goes bad, that's when it's messy. So the case that happened in this town was actually reported in my local papers. A businesswoman named Mary Yoder, she was a really popular chiropractor in the community. She was an artist, big family, died under really suspicious circumstances. And when the case was described down in my local newspaper, there's certain buzzwords that, send off bells and whistles, especially when they describe women as manipulative and hysterical, that make me think that there's a spin on the story. And so we're coming up here to talk to a couple people who are very close to the case, and hopefully that'll shed light on what the fact and the fiction is.
My name's Janine King, and I'm Mary Yoder's younger sister. There were 8 siblings. Mary was number 5, I was number 6. Big Catholic family. We grew up in this little house. 6 girls, 3 in a bedroom, all kind of on top of each other. But we lived out in the country. We spent a lot of time in the woods and in the fields and at the crick, as we called it. Mary was so much into nature. She was our nature girl. Well, Mary and Bill, they had gone to chiropractic college in Georgia. When she met Bill, 10 years her senior, he was actually student teaching. He was so intelligent and capable, and she was absolutely adored him, smitten with him. And then right after they graduated in the mid-'80s, they immediately moved back to Utica to set up practice.
My name is Sandra Taylor, and I worked for the Yoders for 25 years as their office manager. The office was very family-oriented. They had 3 children, Leanna, Tamron, and Adam was the youngest. and they would bring him to work in the beginning when he was a baby, and we would help watch him.
Mary was always busy. She actually had the biggest patient load. Bill did most of the paperwork.
When her children were young, she, pretty much worked and went home. And now she really seemed to be coming in her own.
Check, test, check, test, test.
She had more freedom, just pursuing all of her interests that she really hadn't had opportunity to before. And she was having the time of her life for the first time. That day, I get a call from my sister Sally, and she says, "Did you hear about Mary? Did you hear about Mary? She's in the hospital, she coded." I remember driving to the hospital and just saying, "Mary, hang on, hang on, hang on." She just had taken a terrible turn for the worse. She hung on for dear life, and she coded 6 or 7 times before she finally died.
Dr. Mary Yoder was my sister. Like, to have that in your yard every day is just a testament to how much Janine is invested in this. And all her neighbors have to be invested in it as well. I am meeting with Mary Yoder's sister, Janine, who has some very big issues with how this case unfolded. This is beautiful.
Oh, well, thanks.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to meet you, really, and I so appreciate your interest.
I am very interested, and it seems like there's more and more to talk about as the days go by.
Oh, there's so much to this case, yeah.
So once everyone gathered at the hospital and said their goodbyes to Mary, what happens after that?
We were just so shocked, and just in terrible pain. We were, we'd lost Mary, and so unexpectedly. It was just awful.
But you still had no idea what Mary had died from.
No, well, the day after Mary died, Mary's daughter, Liana, who was a physician herself, went to see my sister Sally, and she told her that Mary had died of ascending cholangitis. Mary's death didn't seem to make sense. And a month later, I took my mother to a doctor's appointment. My mother's doctor, I didn't even realize it, was the attending physician who'd been on call when Mary went into the hospital, and he oversaw her case. And he's saying things to me like that make no sense. I said, "So what are you saying? That Mary didn't die of ascending cholangitis?" And he said, "That's absolutely wrong." He said they'd never seen anything like Mary's death in all of their careers. And then he said that the autopsy showed that something so virulent had entered her system to cause, complete organ shutdown within 36 hours. And that her tissue had been sent out for the most extensive toxicology testing that's done. It takes 8 weeks, and he said that they were all anxiously awaiting the results. So after about the 9th week or so, I called Liana, and she said, yes, they found something. Mary had been poisoned with a substance called colchicine. We were absolutely shocked.
What is colchicine?
Well, most people know it as a treatment for gout. But this was a different form of colchicine. This was pharmaceutical grade. It's a much more highly concentrated form of colchicine used in agriculture and scientific research. Then it dawned on me, oh my gosh, Bill had had Mary's body cremated. He did that when they don't even know how she died.
So I assume that the medical examiner wanted to see, where the colchicine could have come from.
Yes.
So what are the first steps that the police department takes?
Liana kept telling me that the police could not get involved until the FDA signed off that none of Mary's, supplements were contaminated. She said, I couldn't tell anyone. I said, not even the sisters? And she said, okay, the sisters, but no one else. So I sat on it. But we kept researching colchicine. And then my sister Sharon was the first one to find that it's used to grow very potent marijuana. And the thing is, we knew that Bill had grown marijuana.
Okay.
So that they could finance chiropractic college.
With the weed money.
I would imagine. I thought that they did the one crop in South Carolina. And we knew that he had treated the seeds in some special way to create all-female plants that were highly potent. Then it was like, uh-oh. Sharon just said, this is ridiculous. I'm gonna call the police and just find out if there is an investigation underway.
Sheriff's office received a phone call from a concerned family member. The family member felt that Mary's death was suspicious and wanted us to investigate.
Investigators say 60-year-old Dr. Mary Louise Yoder died last July after being poisoned. The medical examiner's office declared Yoder's death a homicide. Cause of death was colchicine toxicity.
People are shocked and stunned and like, you know, how could this have happened to Mary and who could have done it?
Now they know it's not a natural death. And in a town this small, everyone starts realizing they likely know the killer.
My name is Tony Martino. I'm the director of the Northeast Cybersecurity and Forensics Center at Utica College, 20 years veteran of the Utica Police Department. I actually received a call from one of the investigators from the sheriff's office who said, is there anything on any of these computers and cellular phones that were in use at the chiropractic office that could assist the sheriff's department in understanding why Mary Yoder was deceased?
There were a lot of rumors as to who did it. Therefore, I wasn't surprised that they would check the office because typically they always look at the spouse first.
It was obvious that they thought Bill was the prime suspect because we're some of the first ones to be called in, and everything they were asking us had to do with Bill and Mary's relationship, their finances.
So what did you and your family think at this point? Did you guys think that it was Bill?
I was not ready to point the finger at Bill. I just figured, well, if the cops do their job, they'll figure it out. I did tell them some red flag things, you know, that he had been a controlling husband, you know, that Mary had in later years had been much more successful than him, that they had financial problems. But then Lieutenant Ferguson, the one who interviewed me, he just kind of startled me. He asked me, Janine, I got a question for you. Do you think Bill killed Mary? And I was like, no, I don't think so. But then I said, well, I want to qualify that. I said, if you find he's involved with another woman, then I think it's possible. So the investigating sheriffs follow him. In following him, they found out he was involved with someone. It was my sister, Kathy.
Okay. So, of all the people in the world.
Yeah.
To find out it was your sister.
It was at that point that we believed he was guilty.
It seems like a natural conclusion. There's an affair. The wife
Here's some information.
All roads lead to the husband, right?
Sharon was the one who maintained contact, and she would talk to the supervising sheriff. And she knows he's about to interview Bill. So she finally gets a hold of him, and he tells her that they've interviewed Bill, but Bill's in the clear. He's a good guy, and they're singing his praises. They had done a 180. Bill was no longer a suspect, they said, and that they had a new suspect that they were very sure of.
How'd you feel about that? Because that's big news.
At first, we were relieved, you know, very relieved. I was happy. But we were like thinking, okay, well, if it's not Bill, who could it be?
This isn't a crime of passion. This isn't a crime that happened in the spur of a moment. This was something that was plotted and planned. And so it leaves an entire community wondering, Who wanted Mary Yoder dead?
Talking to the Town Talk 100.7 FM. Jay and Rocco in studio. Our conversation here with a guest this morning is Tony Martino, the director of the Northeast Cybersecurity and Forensic Center at Utica College. Tony, welcome back in studio with us here this morning.
Great to be here.
What led you to believe foul play here, and ultimately it all led to Mary's death?
As we get later in the investigation, an anonymous letter is mailed to the sheriff's office
implicating Mary's son,
Adam Yoder.
So much has been made about this letter that was delivered to the sheriff's department.
Yeah.
And so what was in that letter?
It implicated Adam because it said that the colchicine was in his car. They had Adam come in. He thought that he was just going in there for an interview. And then they searched his car and they found it.
So that must have been like a bombshell in the family.
Absolutely.
What was Mary's relationship with Adam?
At the time of her death, Adam was having a lot of problems. You know, he had drug and alcohol problems. He, he's a gifted kid, but he doesn't stick with anything, and he was borrowing a lot of money from Mary. So their relationship was strained.
Yeah.
So they found the colchicine in his car, but they let him go.
That day?
Yeah.
Investigators, trusting their gut, trusting their judgment, let Adam Yoder go home because it was their feeling that whoever wrote that letter was responsible for Mary's death. They even asked him, who might have been trying to do this to you? Who might have been trying to frame you?
The letter is clearly written by someone with actual knowledge. So now with that letter in hand, the question becomes immediately, who wrote the letter? We found very quickly that letter was authored on the computer that was from the chiropractic office. That told us right off the bat that the person who sent the letter had physical access to the devices that were in our laboratory. And we knew from the information that the sheriff's department had told us that that was a relatively small sphere of people that included Bill Yoder, Mary Yoder, Adam Yoder, and Caitlin Conley.
Katie Connolly was Adam's girlfriend, but then she started working at the front desk in the office of Mary and Bill after I left. And Katie seemed to fit in very well there. She was good with the patients, and I was shocked. I just couldn't figure out a reason why Katie would want to hurt Mary.
So you've been told by the police department that Bill and Adam are not suspects and that, in fact, it's no one in the family.
Right.
So the town starts murmuring about this. What were your thoughts on Katie being a suspect?
We all made a point, Sally, Sharon, and I, to call them and say, if Katie is a suspect, please consider the possibility that she's being framed.
Really?
We all said that. Mary loved Katie. All we ever heard was good things about Katie from Mary, from everyone, from the Yoders. So it's like, well, what motive could she possibly have?
Rumors were circulating. People were talking about this relationship that Bill Yoder was having with his wife's sister. There was also this opinion that Caitlin Conley was a smart girl, liked in the community, cared for animals, was good in school, had a lot going for her, and nobody could give a reason why she would have, out of nowhere, risked it all to do something so horrific.
When Katie was first called down to the Oneida County Sheriff's, it was under the premise that she was just helping them gather information and really just try to come to the understanding of what happened to Mary. When in reality, they were looking at her as a suspect.
So you are our letter writer, correct?
Right.
So what exactly on Caitlin Conley's devices that were used at the office and her cell phone led you to believe that she was up to some sort of foul play here, and ultimately it all led to Mary's death?
So one of the things that the investigators were working on was, where did the poison come from? How was it purchased? How was it delivered? How was it received? The sheriff's office brings us printed documentation of basically purchase requests for the chemical colchicine from a chemical company. There's a unique watermark on the documentation that says, scanned by cam scanner. We only find evidence of the cam scanner app in one place. It is on Caitlin Conley's cell phone. And the app had been used with a Gmail account, which comes to play throughout this case again and again and again. This Mr. Adam Yoder 1990 at gmail.com. Our forensic examination showed that Mr. Adam Yoder 1990 at gmail.com was not similar to any email address that Adam Yoder was using on any of his devices. What that told me is that the account probably wasn't created by Adam Yoder. There is a point here where we are beginning to say, roads keep leading back to the same place, Caitlin Conley.
As far as the electronic devices, there wasn't a search warrant that went to Bill Yoder's residence, that went to Adam Yoder's residence to seize these items. Both of them were asked and voluntarily brought the equipment to the forensic center to be examined. Is that true?
I believe that is true.
So how do we know they didn't use any other devices?
Well, your challenge there is you need a court order. You need a warrant.
They have us come in for this presentation that they said, we'll be without a shadow of a doubt convinced that Katie did this. Well, one of the things that they showed, they put up on the overhead projector, was this letter of intent that we didn't know existed. As soon as Sally and I saw it, we look at each other and it's like, there it is. We tried to tell them, explain to them the connection between the special method Bill had used to grow marijuana in the past and colchicine. But he was like, nah, it's 30 years ago, it's not relevant, we don't care.
The death of a chiropractor has been under investigation for many months, and now almost a year after her death, prosecutors believe the person responsible is in custody.
They believe her secretary, 23-year-old Caitlin Conley, is the one who did it. Conley was arrested and charged with Dr. Yoder's murder. Investigators say falsified documents link her to the crime.
Whether you knew Caitlin Conley or not, a lot of people knew the Conley family. The father was someone, he had a business. There were sisters that are nurses. They lived in a small town community of Secoit. Everybody seemed to know who the Conleys were.
I'm Shannon. I am Katie Conley's younger sister. I am one of 4, and then we also have 3 older sisters as well. So we come from a big family of girls, and we're all very, very close. The way they raised us was to be good people, a house filled with love and teaching hard work and the value of it. So I feel like we all grew up being caregivers. Katie is very smart. She graduated in the top 10 of her class at school. She was very focused on her academics and very goal-oriented. So it's hard to hear people make assumptions of who Katie is when it goes against everything that we know her to be.
Prosecutors believe Caitlin Conley poisoned 60-year-old Mary Yoder in July of 2015. Opening statements are scheduled to begin Tuesday morning.
I'm Patrick Van Otten. I was juror number 11 in the Caitlin Conley murder trial. My involvement started with a letter in the mail saying I was up for jury duty. I went down there. It's a little process, and they weeded people out, and they asked, did I know anyone? I said, yes, I know the Conleys. Our daughters played sports together, and my son was in the same graduating class at Secoit as Adam Yoder, their son. So I knew both sides, and surprisingly, I thought I would be done, and they asked me, could you be objective? Yes, I can be very objective. I can do it by the facts. I could convict my own daughter if there was proof. And the prosecutor said, well, that's good enough for me, and they put me on the trial.
The trial begins. The town's whole job now is to decide if one of their own could have committed this terrible crime.
The prosecution's belief was that Caitlin Conley plotted Mary's murder to get back at Adam as a woman scorned.
Lacey, the prosecutor, said Caitlin was a scorned, upset little girl, upset at her boyfriend, and wanted revenge on her boyfriend no matter what, so she poisoned Mary Yoder. That was the prosecution's story.
The prosecution's theory is that Caitlin Conley ordered colchicine, this deadly poison, and then somehow, at some point, at some time, Caitlin put this poison into a shake that Mary Yoder drank for lunch at work the same day that both of them were working, and then within hours, Mary Yoder was sick and winding up in the hospital the next day. A day later or so, she was dead.
Really, the only thing that was proven was Mary ingested colchicine. They never were able to prove, honestly, how she ingested it. They never took the shake bottle. They never tested that. And they discredited Mary's own voice on her medical intake record for her trip to the ER. She flat out says, patient states she had a protein bar for lunch. Patient ate grilled chicken for dinner. This is her own words. You're not going to lie to the nurses when you're going to the ER for these problems, and this is the day after she ate these things.
There is a sense here that the women in this case are not being heard. No one's listening to them. And so the question becomes, what real concrete evidence do they have against Katie?
The prosecution's focus was on user attribution that pointed only to Caitlin Conley. That was true of the computer at the chiropractic office, and that was true of Caitlin Conley's cell phone.
My name is attorney Christopher Pelly, and I represent Caitlin Conley. There was information on the phone that tended to support the theory of the prosecution, but it couldn't have been attributed to any one person placing it there, especially because Adam Yoder testified and admitted that he had access to the data in the programs on her phone, as well as her ID, her Apple ID, and password.
You couldn't point a finger at anyone and say they did it. There was a possibility at Bill Yoder, Adam Yoder, Caitlin Conley, and some of it wasn't even possible for Caitlin to do.
Because everybody had access to this office, it devalues the evidence. It certainly falls far short from Caitlin murdered Mary Yoder.
Let's talk about the computers for a second, because so much of the case against Katie is all tech-based.
Yeah, their approach was that Katie, according to Bill, Katie was the only person who used the front office computer. And so she had to have been the person that ordered the colchicine. When that, as it turns out, is definitely is not true. He had control of the front office computer from his computer in the back office. They didn't physically see her do it, and it could have just as well been anybody that was at the office, which would have been Bill, and Adam had access to the office too.
The defense says the prosecution is trying the wrong person. Defense attorney Chris Pelly claims that William Yoder, the victim's husband, had access to colchicine and motive to kill his wife. Pelly said the fact that Yoder wanted his wife's body cremated without an autopsy was suspicious.
One particular witness testified very clearly that she saw Bill and Kathy on Kathy's porch 2 weeks prior to Mary's death.
Bill was holding Kathy and he was kissing her. It was very intense.
But Bill Yoder and Mary Yoder's sister stated at trial. The relationship started several months after Mary Yoder had died.
The romantic relationship began sometime in September.
The idea of Having someone's life in your hands was very, very, very stressful to me. Worse than anything, worse than being in the war, worse than being in the military, worse than seeing your child hurt. Hardest thing I ever did.
We're at the point now in the trial where the jury, the members of this small community, have to make the very difficult decision of, have they seen enough evidence that can only point to Katie? Do they believe, beyond reasonable doubt, that the prosecution has proven their case against her?
The jury deliberation was very emotional. It was, people yelled. Me, I yelled a few times. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. You need to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And between us in there that thought she was not guilty, we found reasonable doubt in every aspect of everything.
Well, murder case in Oneida County is far from over. After nearly 24 hours of deliberations, the jury in the Caitlin Conley trial told the judge they would never be able to reach a unanimous decision.
Well, the Conley family and Caitlin Conley herself left the courtroom today with smiles on their faces and tears in their eyes, knowing that since the judge has declared this a mistrial, the case will be tried again with a new jury.
And it came back as a hung jury, which to us we took as a victory. At that point, we're taking any little victory that we can, just because we've seen how bad it can go, like how catastrophic the system can value.
At what point did you get in contact with Katie's family?
We first communicated with them at the trial.
That was your first experience with
them?
them?
Yeah, and my sisters and I, we would sit with the Conleys to show support. We let them know that we did not believe Katie did it.
There is so much to dig into here, so I want to go talk to Katie Connolly and her family.